Hello, my name is Indy Bhullar and I am Curator for Economics and Social Policy at the Library of the London School of Economics. And I work with documents that show how social and economic history have changed and developed. And this includes histories revealing how children have worked and have been exploited in the past. These histories help to give us the background and show why protections and then rights for children have now been put in place. This is, or rather was, the Quarry Bank Mill, which is in Cheshire. It might look like a beautiful place, but over 100 years ago, it was a busy factory spinning cotton with a workforce made up of adults and children. Children, often from nearby workhouses, were apprenticed, that is, forcibly trained, to work here for 9 years. Children would also work in domestic settings or smaller workshops. This is a pern winder, which winds silk onto bobbins and was operated by children. This mill in Macclesfield, also in Cheshire, shows Victorian machinery used for weaving silk. These date from later in the 1800s, and children would often collect and fit bobbins. Part of the reason so many children worked was that 40%, almost half the population, was under 12 in 1820. The Industrial Revolution was fueled by child labour as well as by coal. Gradually, Factory Acts from 1833 onwards restricted the age at which children could start work, the hours they could work, and then how long they needed to go to school for. This mill spun silk, which was less dusty and lighter work than cotton. Silk manufacturers, however, were exempted from some of the restrictions placed on children working in the 1833 Act, and others until 1878. After the Education Act was passed in 1870, mill owners made sure children attended school in a limited way until the 1890s, when a local report on the health of children in Macclesfield found that more had rickets and other ailments linked to working in the mills than children in surrounding areas who had been checked by school inspectors. Factory work was not the only sort of work that children did. At LSE Library, we have a book called Street Life in London. It was published over the course of 1876 to 1877, and it contains articles by the radical writer Adolphe Smith and the photographer John Thompson. The unique selling point of Street Life was a series of photographs which were taken by Thompson of ordinary working people supposedly going about their days in London. They were described as taken from life. In these photographs, we see a boy working as a shoe cleaner and another working as an entertainer on the streets of London. This photograph is of a group of people outside a pub in Whitechapel in East London. The man in the foreground on the right side was named Hooky Alf as a result of his left hand being amputated and replaced by a hook because of an accident at work. Drinking happened in public houses, in pubs, and often spilled out onto the streets. People partly drank to keep warm, and it also gave them a place to escape the streets or the overcrowded rooms in which they lodged. But reformers and politicians were concerned about the impact of alcohol on children, the age they started drinking it, addiction to it, and whether they were neglected if their parents drank too much. In the mid-1880s, a man called Charles Booth started a survey looking at poverty in London. He was interested in how much there was, but also wanted to know some of the reasons for why there was poverty. He gathered lots of evidence and is a major source of information that helps us to know what life was like in London back then. One of his researchers talked to a police officer about children drinking and the problem of children being sent to pubs to fetch beer for their parents and take it home. Booth also created poverty maps, which showed at a street-by-street level where poverty and wealth actually were in London at the time. He showed that people living in poverty, the light blue, dark blue, and black colours, made up 30% of the population. Information was also taken from school inspectors, like this notebook for Poplar in East London, which covers school board visitors Mr. George Thomas and Mr. G. In 1903, a law was put in place to control the employment of children. Children could still work, but they and the people that employed them needed special licenses. These documents are from a 1913 Committee on Child Labour. This shows the number of children working in Birmingham, for example, and a license that a child needed to carry if they worked. Nearly 100 years after the Committee on Child Labour, the 1989 UN Convention on Child Rights was signed by 140 countries. Article 32 of the Convention states that governments must protect children from economic exploitation and work that is dangerous or might harm their health, development, or education. Governments must set a minimum age for children to work and to ensure that working conditions are safe and appropriate. The Convention put in place stronger conditions on children and exploitative work. However, many children in the world still work at a young age and in unsafe conditions. Children worked mainly because low wages meant their families, if they had them, needed their income. The introduction of forms of welfare helped reduce this burden on families and children from the 1900s onwards. But despite the cradle-to-grave reforms, which introduced free healthcare and family allowances after the Second World War, there was still widespread poverty. The Child Poverty Action Group was founded in 1965 and drew attention to 2.25 million children who lived in poverty in Britain at the time. Today, that number has doubled. Having a job isn't a guaranteed route out of poverty. 75% of children growing up in poverty live in a household where at least one person works.